Xanth's eyes widened as she gazed upon the first human male to catch her attention. The young Hazari commander had come to Earth with intentions of conquest, but now found herself captivated by the rugged charm of the species she was meant to subjugate. Just hours earlier, panic had gripped the planet as Xanth's massive warship entered Earth's orbit. Military forces worldwide scrambled to respond, their weapons proving useless against the Hazari's superior technology. With a few precise energy bursts, Earth's satellite defenses crumbled and global communications went dark. Xanth stood on the bridge of her ship, poised to launch the ground assault that would cement her place among the Hazari elite. Her finger hovered over the command console when an incoming transmission changed everything. Her superiors ordered her to delay the attack and gather intelligence on human society first. Determined to prove herself, Xanth didn't hesitate. She activated her advanced holographic disguise and beamed down to a bustling metropolis. The sights, sounds, and smells overwhelmed her alien senses as she navigated the crowded streets in her human form. Meanwhile, ex-military tactician Carl Cooper found himself thrust back into action. Government officials, desperate for any advantage against the alien threat, recruited the grizzled security consultant to analyze the Hazari's attack patterns and formulate a defense strategy. As Carl pored over satellite imagery and sensor data, a suspicion formed. The precision of the attacks, the strategic targets, it all pointed to boots on the ground, alien infiltrators gathering intel just like humans would. His jaw clenched as he realized the enemy was likely already among them. Across the city, Xanth entered a pulsing nightclub she'd chosen as her base of operations. The flashing lights and throbbing music provided cover as she observed human social interactions. She sipped an odd bubbling liquid, grimacing at its effect on her biology. That's when she saw him, a human male unlike the others. His eyes scanned the room with predatory focus. His muscular frame spoke of combat training. Xanth felt an unfamiliar flutter in her midsection as their gazes met. Neither Carl nor Xanth realized the profound impact of that moment. He saw a potential lead, unaware she was the very alien commander he sought. She experienced her first taste of attraction, oblivious that he represented humanity's best hope for survival. Around them, the city teetered on the brink of chaos. Emergency sirens wailed as looting began. Militia groups armed themselves while others considered surrender. Scientists worked frantically to understand the alien tech that had so easily neutralized Earth's defenses. The fate of two species now rested on this chance encounter between enemies. As Carl made his way toward the mysterious woman at the bar, neither could have predicted how their interaction would reshape the future of Earth and the Hazari Empire. As their eyes locked across the pulsing nightclub, neither Carl nor Xanth could have anticipated the seismic shift about to rock their worlds. Carl's tactical mind whirred into action, cataloging every detail of the enigmatic woman at the bar. Her posture, her gaze, the way she held her drink, everything about her screamed outlier to his trained eye. Xanth, for her part, found herself uncharacteristically flustered by the human's intense scrutiny. She'd observed countless males since her arrival, but none had affected her like this. His piercing eyes seemed to cut through her disguise, setting off alarm bells in her mind even as it sent an unfamiliar thrill through her body. As Carl made his way towards her, weaving through the writhing mass of dancers, Xanth steeled herself. This was precisely the kind of close encounter she'd come for. An opportunity to study human behavior up close. She couldn't let these strange new sensations compromise her mission. "This seat taken?" Carl's gruff voice cut through the thumping bass as he gestured to the empty bar stool beside her. Xanth shook her head, not trusting her voice modulator to accurately convey the sudden dryness in her throat. She watched as he settled onto the seat, his movements fluid yet controlled. A predator perfectly at ease in his environment. "I'm Carl," he said, flagging down the bartender. "Haven't seen you around here before." "Stella," Xanth replied, the alias rolling off her tongue with practiced ease. "I'm new in town." Carl nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I thought as much. What brings you to our fair city, Stella?" As they talked, Xanth found herself increasingly captivated. Carl's questions were probing yet subtle. his manner both charming and disarming. She realized with a start that he was skillfully extracting information from her, a tactic she herself often employed. Outside the Starlight Lounge, Jake Hawkins and his team of resistance fighters moved into position. They'd spent weeks tracking unusual energy signatures and data patterns, all pointing to this newly opened club as a potential alien stronghold. "Remember," Jake whispered into his comm, "we're looking for any sign of extraterrestrial tech or activity. If you spot something, call it in. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary." Back inside, Carl and Xanth's conversation had taken an unexpected turn. What had started as a tactical interrogation on both sides had evolved into a genuine exchange of ideas. Carl found himself impressed by Stella's keen insights into human nature, while Xanth was fascinated by the depth of Carl's knowledge and his unique perspective on his own species. "You know," Carl said, leaning in closer, "there's something different about you, Stella. I can't quite put my finger on it, but—" His words were cut short by a sudden commotion at the club's entrance. The resistance team burst in, weapons raised, shouting orders that were quickly drowned out by panicked screams. Xanth's hand flew to the concealed control panel on her wrist, activating her personal force field. In the chaos, she hesitated. Her mission parameters dictated swift, decisive action against any human threat. But as she looked at Carl, who had instinctively moved to shield her, she felt an unfamiliar pang of doubt. Carl's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The attacker's gear and tactics screamed militia rather than law enforcement. But why target a nightclub? Unless... His train of thought derailed as he caught a flicker in his peripheral vision. For a split second, Stella's form seemed to waver, revealing something distinctly non-human underneath. Carl blinked, convinced he'd imagined it, but deep down, pieces began falling into place. "We need to move," he growled, grabbing Xanth's hand. "Now!" Xanth allowed herself to be led towards a back exit, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting directives. Carl's touch sent jolts of electricity through her alien nervous system, further clouding her judgment. They burst out into a dark alley, the sounds of chaos muffled behind them. Carl pulled Stella close, his eyes searching her face. "Who are you, really?" he demanded, his voice low and intense. Xanth opened her mouth to reply, to spin another lie, but found she couldn't. Something in Carl's gaze held her transfixed. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt seen. Not as a disguise, not as an invader, but as herself. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching footsteps. Without a word, Carl led them deeper into the maze of back alleys, his grip on Xanth's hand never loosening. As they ran, Xanth's thoughts turned to her ship in orbit. By now, Zorn would have noticed her prolonged silence. Her second-in-command was nothing if not ruthlessly efficient. He would not hesitate to label her compromised if he suspected even the slightest deviation from their mission. They finally stopped in an abandoned warehouse, both breathing heavily. Carl released Xanth's hand and took a step back, his eyes never leaving her face. "Talk," he said simply. Xanth knew she stood at a crossroads. Every fiber of her being, every bit of her training screamed at her to eliminate this human who had seen through her disguise. But as she looked at Carl, she realized she couldn't bring herself to harm him. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the warehouse's grimy windows, Xanth made a decision that would alter the course of two civilizations. She reached for her holographic controls, ready to reveal her true self to the human who had, against adversity, captured her heart. High above them, Zorn's eyes narrowed as he reviewed the data from Xanth's last known location. His fingers hovered over the ship's weapon controls. Whatever had happened to his commander, he would not allow it to jeopardize their mission. The invasion of Earth would proceed, with or without Xanth. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the grimy warehouse windows, Carl and Xanth exchanged a knowing look. They couldn't linger here much longer. "We need to move," Carl said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have a place we can go, but it won't be easy getting there." Xanth nodded, her alien features shimmering back into her human disguise. "Lead the way." They slipped out of the warehouse, blending into the early morning shadows. The city was beginning to stir, an uneasy tension hanging in the air. Emergency vehicles wailed in the distance, and military aircraft roared overhead. Carl guided them through a maze of back alleys and side streets, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. Xanth matched his pace, her enhanced senses on high alert. As they rounded a corner, Carl suddenly pulled Xanth into a narrow doorway. Seconds later, a Hazari search party glided past, their hovering drones sweeping the area with pulsing energy beams. Xanth's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the drone's energy signature. Zorn had deployed the elite trackers. Her time was running out. Once the coast was clear, they continued their journey. Carl led them to a nondescript garage on the outskirts of the city. He punched a complex code into a hidden panel, and a section of the floor slid away, revealing a steep staircase. "After you," he said, gesturing to Xanth. The safe house was a stark, windowless bunker filled with survival gear and communication equipment. As the hidden entrance sealed behind them, Carl turned to face Xanth, his expression unreadable. "All right," he said, crossing his arms. "I think it's time you told me exactly who or what you are." Xanth hesitated, her hand hovering over the holographic controls on her wrist. With a deep breath, she deactivated her disguise. Carl's eyes widened as Xanth's true form was revealed. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent blue hue, and delicate fin-like structures adorned her head where hair would be on a human. Her eyes, now a striking violet, met Carl's gaze unflinchingly. "My name is Xanth," she said, her voice taking on a melodic quality, without the human vocal modulator. "I am the commander of the Hazari invasion force." Carl took a step back, his hand instinctively moving to the weapon at his hip. "Why are you here? What do the Hazari want with Earth?" Xanth sank into a nearby chair, suddenly looking weary. "Resources, primarily. Our homeworld is dying, and Earth represents our best hope for survival." She looked up at Carl, her alien features etched with conflict. "But since I've been here, observing your people, I'm not sure I can go through with it." As Xanth explained the intricacies of Hazari culture and the reasons behind the invasion, Carl found himself drawn in. He began to see the conflict from a new perspective, understanding the desperation that had driven an entire species to such drastic measures. "There has to be another way," Carl said, pacing the room. "A way for both our species to survive without destroying each other." Xanth stood, moving closer to Carl. "Perhaps there is. With your knowledge of human tactics and my understanding of Hazari technology, we might be able to find a solution." As they began to brainstorm, the air between them crackled with a different kind of energy. Their shared goal brought them closer, both physically and emotionally. Carl found himself mesmerized by Xanth's alien grace, while Xanth marveled at the depth of Carl's compassion and strategic mind. Meanwhile, across the city, Jake Hawkins and his resistance team huddled around a bank of monitors. Security footage from the Starlight Lounge played on repeat, focusing on Carl's interaction with the mysterious woman. "That's him," Jake said, pointing to Carl's face on the screen. "Ex-military top-tier tactician. If he's working with the aliens, we're in serious trouble." One of Jake's team members looked up from a computer terminal. "Sir, we've got a hit on facial recognition. A farmer reported suspicious activity at an old property registered to Carl Cooper." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Gear up. We move in 10 minutes." High above Earth's atmosphere, Zorn paced the bridge of the Hazari warship. Holographic displays showed the planet below, dotted with red markers indicating search patterns. "Commander," a junior officer called out, "we've detected a faint trace of Commander Xanth's biosignature. It's weak, but it's definitely her." Zorn's mandibles clicked in anticipation. "Pinpoint the location and deploy a strike team immediately." He turned to face the planet looming large in the view screen. "It's time to accelerate our plans. Prepare the ground forces for full deployment." Back in the safe house, Carl and Xanth had made significant progress. They had identified key weaknesses in the Hazari defense systems that Earth's military could exploit, as well as potential areas for negotiation. As Carl leaned over a makeshift map, plotting out strategy, Xanth found herself drawn to him. She reached out, her alien hand gently touching his arm. Carl looked up, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared understanding. "Carl," Xanth began, her voice soft, "I need you to know..." Her words were cut short by a sharp beeping from one of Carl's security monitors. They both turned to see a group of armed figures approaching the safe house. "Looks like we've got company," Carl said grimly, reaching for his weapon. Xanth activated her personal shield, her body tensing for battle. "Carl, there's something else you should know. A small group of my people, led by an officer named Lyra, have expressed doubts about the invasion. They might be willing to help us." Carl nodded, processing this new information. If we can make contact with them, it could change everything. As they prepared to face the approaching threat, the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. Outside, Jake and his resistance fighters took up positions around the safe house, unaware that they were about to stumble into a situation far more complex than they had imagined. In orbit, Zorn's finger hovered over the command to launch a full-scale attack on Earth's major cities. His decision would set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the course of both human and Hazari history. Inside the safe house, Carl and Xanth shared one last look, both acutely aware that the next few moments could determine not just their fate, but that of their entire species. With a nod of silent understanding, they moved into position, ready to face whatever came through that door. The tension in the air was palpable as Carl and Xanth exchanged a final glance. Their fingers intertwined for a brief moment before they took their positions. Just as the first sounds of Jake's team attempting to breach the safe house reached their ears, Carl's eyes widened with sudden inspiration. He rushed to the communication console, his fingers flying over the controls. "What are you doing?" Xanth asked, her violet eyes fixed on the door. "Changing the game," Carl replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We can't fight our way out of this, but maybe we can talk our way out." With a few final keystrokes, Carl activated the global broadcast system. He took a deep breath and began to speak, his words echoing across the planet and into the depths of space. "People of Earth and to the Hazari forces in orbit, I am Carl Cooper. With me is Commander Xanth of the Hazari invasion fleet. We come to you with a proposal for peace." Xanth stepped forward, her holographic disguise shimmering away to reveal her true form. "I am Xanth, and what Carl says is true. Our worlds stand on the brink of war, but it doesn't have to be this way. We can find a solution that ensures the survival of both our species." As their message reverberated across the globe and beyond, the effect was immediate. Outside the safe house, Jake Hawkins and his team froze in their tracks, weapons half raised as they listened to the broadcast emanating from within. In orbit, aboard the Hazari warship, Zorn's claw hovered over the command to launch the full-scale attack. His mandibles clicked in agitation as he processed the unexpected turn of events. Back in the safe house, Carl and Xanth worked feverishly to implement the second phase of their hastily formed plan. They moved to a corner of the room where a strange device sat, cobbled together from a mix of human and Hazari technology. "Are you sure this will work?" Xanth asked, her fingers dancing over the alien controls. Carl nodded, connecting the last few wires. "It has to. It's our only shot at getting out of here alive." As the sounds of both human and Hazari forces converging on their location grew louder, Carl activated the device. A low hum filled the air, building to a crescendo before releasing a powerful electromagnetic pulse. Outside, Jake's team stumbled as their communications equipment suddenly went dead. On the opposite side of the building, Krell's Hazari search party found their energy shields flickering and failing. In the momentary confusion, Carl and Xanth made their move. They slipped through a hidden panel in the floor, descending into a narrow tunnel that led away from the safe house. They emerged in a dense forest, the early morning light filtering through the canopy above. As they caught their breath, a rustling in the nearby underbrush put them on high alert. "Commander Xanth," a melodic voice called out softly. A group of Hazari soldiers stepped into view, led by a lithe female figure. "I am Lyra. We received your broadcast and came as quickly as we could." Xanth's eyes widened in recognition. "Lyra, you made it. I wasn't sure if you'd received my earlier communications." As Lyra and her group of defectors pledged their allegiance to Xanth, Carl's mind raced with the possibilities this new development presented. He pulled out a battered tablet, miraculously still functioning after the EMP. "We need to move fast," he said, pulling up a map of the area. "Zorn's going to regroup quickly, and Earth's military isn't going to sit idle for long." Xanth nodded, her alien features set in commitment. "We need to get to a more powerful communications array. The safe house equipment wasn't enough to transmit all the data we've compiled." Lyra stepped forward, her iridescent skin shimmering in the dappled sunlight. "There's a secondary Hazari command post not far from here. Its communication array would be more than sufficient." As the group began to move through the forest, Carl couldn't help but marvel at the surreal nature of their situation. Humans and Hazari working side by side to prevent a war that could destroy both their civilizations. Meanwhile, in the halls of power across the globe, Earth's leaders debated furiously over the implications of Carl and Xanth's broadcast. In Washington, D.C., General Marcus Steele smacked his palm on the Situation Room table. "This is clearly a ploy by the aliens," he growled, his face flushed with anger. "We should launch a full-scale counterattack while they're in disarray." The president, her face lined with worry, shook her head. "We can't ignore the possibility of a peaceful resolution. The people are already taking to the streets, demanding we explore this option." Indeed, across the planet, millions had poured into the streets. From New York to New Delhi, Tokyo to Tunis, the global population united in a singular call for peace. High above the Earth, aboard the Hazari warship, Zorn faced a crisis of his own. A group of officers, led by his second-in-command, confronted him on the bridge. "Commander," the second-in-command spoke, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We cannot ignore Xanth's message. Many of the crew believe we should at least consider the humans' offer of negotiation." Zorn's eyes narrowed dangerously. "This is mutiny," he hissed, reaching for his weapon. Before he could draw, however, the ship rocked violently. Alarms blared as the view screen showed a firefight erupting between Hazari vessels. Back on Earth, Carl, Xanth, and their unlikely alliance of human and Hazari rebels approached the secondary command post. The facility loomed before them, its alien architecture a stark contrast to the surrounding forest. "There," Xanth pointed to a heavily guarded entrance. "That's our way in." As they prepared to make their move, the sound of approaching aircraft filled the air. Carl looked up to see a squadron of Earth's most advanced fighters screaming overhead, heading towards the Hazari ships visible in the sky above. "Looks like we're out of time," Carl said, checking his weapon. "It's now or never." Xanth nodded, her violet eyes meeting Carl's gaze. In that moment, despite the chaos around them and the monumental task ahead, a spark of understanding passed between them. Whatever the outcome, they were in this together. With a silent signal from Xanth, the group surged forward. The air filled with the sound of energy weapons and gunfire as they clashed with the loyal Hazari troops guarding the facility. Carl and Xanth fought side by side, their movements synchronized as if they'd been partners for years rather than days. As they battled their way towards the heart of the command post, neither Carl nor Xanth could have imagined the startling revelations that awaited them inside, nor the far-reaching consequences their actions would have for both their species. The command post's entrance loomed before them, its alien architecture a stark contrast to the surrounding forest. As they approached, the air suddenly filled with the sound of energy weapons and gunfire. Loyal Hazari troops guarding the facility opened fire, forcing Carl, Xanth, and their allies to take cover behind the twisted metal debris scattered around the perimeter. Carl pressed his back against a fallen pillar, the heat of plasma bolts sizzling past his face. He locked eyes with Xanth, who crouched behind a nearby console. With a silent nod, they sprang into action. Xanth's violet eyes narrowed as she focused her energy, activating a personal shield that deflected incoming fire. She darted from cover to cover, drawing the guards' attention while Carl and Lyra led a flanking maneuver. "Now!" Carl shouted, signaling to the human Hazari rebel group. They surged forward, their combined firepower overwhelming the facility's outer defenses. As they breached the command post's entrance, alarms blared, echoing through the metallic corridors. Carl's mind raced, assessing their situation. "Xanth, you need to get to the main control room. We'll hold them off." Xanth hesitated, her alien features contorted with concern. "Carl, He cut her off, squeezing her shoulder. Go. We need that evidence transmitted. It's our only shot at ending this war. With a quick nod, Xanth sprinted down the corridor, her knowledge of Hazari systems guiding her through the labyrinth of the command post. Carl turned to Lyra, her iridescent skin shimmering under the facility's harsh lighting. We need to set up a perimeter. Krell's forces won't be far behind. As if on cue, the sound of approaching aircraft filled the air. Through a shattered window, Carl glimpsed a squadron of Hazari ships descending on their position. Defensive positions, Carl barked, his military training kicking in. He directed the rebel Hazari to fortify the entrance while he led a small team of humans to secure the facility's flanks. Outside, Krell's forces touched down, their energy weapons charging with an ominous hum. The air crackled with tension as both sides prepared for the imminent clash. Inside the command post's main control room, Xanth's fingers flew over the alien console. Streams of data flowed across holographic displays as she worked to compile the evidence of Zorn's conspiracy and the growing support for peace. A stray bolt of energy struck near her position, showering her with sparks. Xanth gritted her teeth, pushing through the pain of a minor burn on her arm. Come on, she muttered, willing the system to work faster. Back at the entrance, Carl and Lyra found themselves in the thick of the battle. Energy bolts and bullets crisscrossed the air as Krell's loyal Hazari troops pushed forward. Carl ducked behind a makeshift barricade, his rifle hot in his hands. He popped up, squeezing off a burst of fire that dropped two advancing Hazari. Beside him, Lyra wielded an energy staff with deadly precision, her movements fluid and graceful despite the chaos. We can't hold them forever, Lyra shouted over the din of battle. Carl's mind raced, analyzing the battlefield. He spotted a weakness in Krell's formation, a gap in their flank that could be exploited. Cover me, he called to Lyra, before tapping the shoulders of two nearby rebels. You two, with me. With a deep breath, Carl vaulted over the barricade, leading his small team in a daring flanking maneuver. They weaved through the debris-strewn battlefield, using the twisted metal and fallen trees as cover. Krell, directing the assault from the rear, noticed the movement too late. Carl's team erupted from their cover, catching the Hazari forces in a devastating crossfire. The sudden attack sowed confusion in the enemy ranks, buying precious time for Xanth to complete her work. High above the earth, aboard the Hazari warship, another battle raged. Thax, a male Hazari officer, led a group of mutineers onto the bridge. They confronted Zorn, weapons raised. This invasion ends now, Commander, Thax declared, his mandibles clicking with commitment. Zorn's eyes narrowed dangerously. You dare challenge me? I am your supreme commander. No longer, Thax replied, gesturing to the view screens showing the conflict on Earth. Your conspiracy has been exposed. We will not be part of this senseless war. Zorn's hand inched towards a hidden panel on his command chair. You leave me no choice, he snarled, activating the ship's failsafe system. Alarms blared throughout the vessel as Zorn's voice boomed over the intercom. Restore my authority, or this ship and everyone aboard will be atomized. The bridge erupted into chaos as Thax and his allies scrambled to override the failsafe. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Marcus Steele paced the situation room, his face etched with lines of worry and frustration. We can't trust these aliens, he growled, turning to face the assembled military leaders. I'm ordering a missile strike on their warship. Now! Before anyone could object, Steele input the launch codes. Across the globe, missile silos rumbled to life, their deadly payloads streaking into the sky. Back at the Hazari command post, Carl's guerrilla tactics had turned the tide of the battle. Krell's forces were in retreat, but Carl knew it was only temporary. He fought his way back to the entrance, linking up with Lyra. Any word from Xanth? He asked, breathing heavily. Lyra shook her head, her alien features creased with worry. Nothing yet. Suddenly, Xanth's voice crackled over their communicators. It's done! The transmission is complete! Carl's heart soared, but the moment of triumph was short-lived. A deafening roar filled the air as Earth's missiles streaked overhead, their fiery trails cutting across the sky towards the Hazari warship. No, Carl whispered, his blood running cold. They had come so close to peace, only to have it snatched away by human fear and mistrust. But then, something extraordinary happened. The Hazari warship, its systems now under Thax's control, sprang to life. Beams of energy lanced out from the vessel, intercepting the incoming missiles. The sky lit up with spectacular explosions as the warheads were neutralized, harmlessly disintegrating in the upper atmosphere. On the ground, humans and Hazari alike watched in awe as their two worlds stepped back from the brink of annihilation. The display of Hazari defensive power, used not to destroy but to protect, became a powerful symbol of the potential for peace. As the last echoes of the explosions faded, Carl rushed to find Xanth. He found her in the control room, slumped against the console, clutching a wound on her side. "Xanth!" He knelt beside her, cradling her in his arms. "Are you all right?" She looked up at him, her violet eyes filled with a mix of pain and hope. "We did it, Carl. They'll have to listen now." As Carl tended to Xanth's injury, reports began flooding in from around the world. The evidence they had transmitted was going viral, exposing the conspiracy and shifting public opinion dramatically in favor of peace talks. But even as they savored this hard-won victory, new challenges loomed on the horizon. The human billionaires implicated in Zorn's plot were already mobilizing their vast resources to undermine the peace process. And somewhere on Earth, in a remote crash site, a battered escape pod cracked open. Zorn emerged, his eyes burning with vengeance as he surveyed the alien landscape around him. Carl helped Xanth to her feet, both of them exhausted but resolute. They knew their fight was just getting started, but for the first time since this conflict began, there was real hope for a peaceful future between their species. As they stepped out of the command post into a world forever changed by their actions, Carl and Xanth's hands found each other, their fingers intertwining. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Together, a symbol of unity in the face of adversity. As they emerged from the command post, they were met with a scene of controlled chaos. Human and Hazari rebels worked side by side, tending to the wounded and securing the perimeter. The air crackled with tension and possibility. Carl's communicator buzzed incessantly, filled with messages from military command and government officials demanding updates and explanations. Xanth's own Hazari communication device pulsed with similar urgency. "I guess we're not going to get much rest," Carl said, his voice tinged with exhaustion and a hint of wry humor. Xanth's mandibles clicked in what Carl had come to recognize as a smile. Rest is for those who haven't just averted interstellar war. Their moment of levity was short-lived. A sleek, official-looking shuttle touched down nearby, kicking up dust and debris. The door slid open, revealing a stern-faced woman in a crisp suit. "Mr. Hawkins, Miss Xanth," she called out, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "I'm Amanda Chen, United Earth Government Liaison. Your presence is required immediately for debriefing and other matters." Carl and Xanth exchanged glances. The real work was just beginning. Over the next few weeks, Carl and Xanth found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. They were shuttled between high-level meetings, press conferences, and strategy sessions. The revelation of Zorn's conspiracy had sent shockwaves through both human and Hazari societies, creating a fragile opportunity for peace. As they prepared for their role in the upcoming negotiations, Carl couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. He was a soldier, not a diplomat. Yet here he was, expected to help shape the future of human-Hazari relations. "You're doing fine," Xanth reassured him one evening as they pored over briefing documents in their shared quarters aboard the newly constructed space station. The station, a marvel of joint human-Hazari engineering, orbited Earth as a symbol of cooperation and the site of the impending peace talks. Carl ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "I just can't shake the feeling that we're missing something. It all seems too easy." Xanth's violet eyes narrowed in thought. "Perhaps because we're so focused on the big picture, we're overlooking the smaller threats." As if on cue, Carl's tablet pinged with a news alert. He groaned as he read the headline, "Alien Lover or Human Traitor, the Shocking Truth About Carl Hawkins." "Looks like Victor Blackwell's media machine is in full swing," Carl muttered, tossing the tablet aside. Xanth picked it up, her expression darkening as she scrolled through the article. They're targeting me as well. Apparently, I'm using my alien wiles to manipulate you. Carl's eyes hardened. We can't let them distract us. We have to stay focused on the peace talks. But the distractions kept mounting. As delegates from Earth and the Hazari homeworld began arriving at the space station, security concerns reached a fever pitch. Carl found himself working closely with General Marcus Steele, the man who had nearly sparked all-out war with his missile strike. I still don't trust them, Steele growled during a tense meeting, his eyes flicking towards Xanth. But I'll be damned if I let anyone sabotage these talks on my watch. Together, they developed a multi-layered security protocol that combined the best of human and Hazari technology. Xanth's insights proved invaluable, identifying potential weaknesses that neither human nor Hazari security experts had considered. As the day of the peace talks approached, the space station hummed with nervous energy. Delegates from both species eyed each other warily in the corridors. Cultural misunderstandings led to minor incidents that threatened to escalate. In the midst of this tension, Carl and Xanth found themselves becoming unofficial mediators, their unique relationship allowing them to bridge the gap between humans and Hazari. It's remarkable, Lyra commented one day as she watched Carl diffuse an argument between a human diplomat and a Hazari cultural attaché. You two have become living proof that our species can coexist. But not everyone saw it that way. As Carl and Xanth's relationship deepened, it became a target for those opposed to peace. Tabloids ran salacious stories about their interspecies affair, while extremist groups on both sides painted them as traitors. Despite the pressure, Carl and Xanth pressed on. They threw themselves into preparations for the peace talks, working with Lyra and sympathetic leaders from both species to draft proposals for integration and cooperation. The night before the talks were set to begin, Carl couldn't sleep. He stood at the viewport in his quarters, gazing out at the blue marble of Earth below. Xanth joined him, her presence a comforting warmth at his side. Do you think we can really do this? Carl asked softly. Bring peace between our peoples? Xanth was quiet for a moment before responding. I believe we must try. The alternative is unthinkable. As they stood there contemplating the future, neither of them noticed the small, blinking device hidden in the air vent. In a secret compartment deep within the station's maintenance sector, Zorn watched the feed from the hidden camera, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent. Enjoy your moment of peace, he hissed. It won't last. In another part of the station, a human maintenance worker with cold eyes carefully adjusted his uniform, concealing the weapon hidden beneath. He glanced at his watch, noting the time. Soon, very soon, chaos would reign. As the station's artificial day cycle began, signaling the start of the historic peace talks, tension hung in the air like an invisible fog. Delegates made their way to the grand conference room, unaware of the forces conspiring to tear apart everything Carl, Xanth, and their allies had worked so hard to build. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of both species. As Carl and Xanth entered the conference room, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, they could not have imagined the true scale of the threat lurking in the shadows. As Carl and Xanth entered the conference room, the air crackled with tension. Delegates from both species filled the space, their hushed conversations creating a low buzz of anticipation. But beneath the veneer of diplomacy, a more sinister undercurrent flowed. Carl's eyes swept the room, noting the positions of security personnel and exit points. He leaned close to Xanth, his voice barely above a whisper. Something's not right. I can feel it. Xanth's mandibles clicked softly in agreement. We need to act quickly. They made their way to General Marcus Steele, who stood rigid near the podium, his face a mask of forced neutrality. Carl pulled him aside, speaking urgently. General, we have credible intel of an imminent threat. Zorn's followers have infiltrated the maintenance crew. Steele's eyes narrowed, years of military training kicking in. Are you certain? As certain as we can be, Xanth interjected. We need to neutralize the threat without alerting the delegates. Steele nodded sharply, tapping his earpiece. Alpha Team, initiate Protocol Omega. Quietly. As Steele's covert team began their systematic sweep of the station, Carl turned to Xanth. I need to lead a strike force to intercept the extremists launching from the moon base. Can you handle things here? Xanth's violet eyes met his, commitment evident. Go. I'll work with Lyra to track down Zorn. Carl gathered a small team of human and Hazari operatives, their diverse skills a testament to the potential of cooperation between their species. They boarded a sleek hybrid craft, its design a fusion of human ingenuity and Hazari technology. As they approached the dark side of the moon, the comm channel crackled to life. Multiple bogies detected, the sensor officer reported. They're on an intercept course. Carl's hands tightened on the controls. Weapons hot. Remember, we need to disable, not destroy. Those ships likely have valuable intel aboard. The space around them erupted into chaos as the extremist ships opened fire. Carl's tactical mind went into overdrive, issuing rapid-fire commands to his team. They weaved through the barrage, their advanced shields absorbing hits that would have vaporized conventional craft. Using a pincer maneuver, Carl's team herded the enemy ships into a tight formation. Now! Carl shouted. A pulse of electromagnetic energy burst from their craft, overloading the extremist systems. One by one, the enemy ships went dark, drifting helplessly in the vacuum of space. Carl's team moved in swiftly, boarding and securing each vessel. Among the captured leaders, they found several of Victor Blackwell's top lieutenants, their faces twisted with anger and defeat. Back on the station, Xanth and Lyra huddled over a holographic display of the station's schematics. There, Lyra pointed to a small, unmarked area in the cargo bay. That's where the signal's coming from. Xanth nodded, her heart racing as she made her way to the cargo bay. She found the hidden compartment, its entrance disguised as part of the wall. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the release mechanism. The door slid open, revealing Zorn hunched over a makeshift command center. He spun around, his eyes widening in surprise and then narrowing with hatred. Traitor, he spat. Xanth stepped forward, her hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. Zorn, it doesn't have to end this way. Think about our people, about the future we could build together with the humans. Zorn's hand hovered over a device on his console. You've been blinded by your affection for that human. You've forgotten what it means to be Hazari. No, Zorn, Xanth replied, her voice steady. I've remembered what it truly means to be Hazari. Our people have always valued progress, exploration, and the pursuit of knowledge. This conflict goes against everything we stand for. She could see the conflict in Zorn's eyes, the deeply ingrained sense of duty warring with the logic of her words. Our history, our traditions, he began. Can evolve, Xanth finished. As they always have. Zorn, you're a decorated commander. Your actions here will shape the future of our species. Will you be remembered as the one who clung to the past, or the one who helped forge a new path? For a long moment, silence reigned in the small compartment. Then slowly, Zorn's shoulders slumped. He stepped away from the console, his voice heavy with resignation. I surrender. As Xanth secured Zorn and began extracting information about the remaining saboteurs, Carl's team returned to the station. They reunited in the corridor outside the conference room, their faces etched with exhaustion, but also hope. We did it, Carl said, taking Xanth's hand in his. Xanth nodded, her mandibles forming the closest approximation of a human smile. For now, but I fear this is only the beginning. They entered the conference room together, where the delegates had been kept unaware of the danger they had faced. As Carl and Xanth took their seats, they could feel the eyes of both humans and Hazari upon them. The atmosphere in the room had shifted, a new undercurrent of respect and curiosity replacing the earlier tension. As the lead human negotiator stood to speak, Carl and Xanth exchanged a glance. They had won this battle, but the war for peace was nowhere near the end. The real challenge lay ahead. Building trust, fostering understanding, and creating a future where humans and Hazari could coexist in harmony. The negotiator cleared his throat, his voice carrying across the silent room. In light of recent events, I believe we have much to discuss. Discuss, the negotiator continued, a new framework for human-Hazari cooperation. As the delegates settled in for what promised to be a lengthy session, Carl's communicator vibrated urgently. He glanced at the screen, his heart racing as he saw Lyra's name. Excusing himself, he slipped out of the conference room with Xanth close behind. "Carl! Xanth?" Lyra's voice came through, breathless and filled with static. "Blackwell's agents, they're everywhere. I've uncovered their plan, but—" A sudden crash interrupted her, followed by muffled shouts. "No! Stay back!" The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Carl and Xanth staring at each other in horror. "We need to move," Carl said, his mind already racing through potential scenarios. "If Blackwell's sleeper agents are active, we don't have much time." Xanth nodded, her violet eyes narrowing with drive. "I have an idea. Follow me." They raced through the station's corridors, their footsteps echoing in the sterile environment. Xanth led them to a small, unmarked door that Carl had never noticed before. She placed her hand on a hidden panel, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, Carl found himself surrounded by unfamiliar technology, its sleek design unmistakably Hazari. "What is this place?" he asked, marveling at the array of holographic displays and pulsing energy cores. "A secret Hazari research lab," Xanth explained as she moved swiftly between consoles. "We've been developing advanced cloaking technology. It's not perfect, but it's our best shot at infiltrating Blackwell's headquarters undetected." As Xanth worked, Carl contacted General Steele, quickly briefing him on the situation. "We need you to coordinate with Thax," Carl instructed. "Form a joint task force and start identifying potential sleeper agents on the station. We can't let Blackwell's plan unfold." "Understood," Steele replied, his voice grim but resolute. "Be careful out there, Hawkins. We're counting on you." Within minutes, Carl and Xanth were equipped with portable cloaking devices, their forms shimmering and blending into the background as they activated the technology. They made their way to a small, nondescript shuttle, its own cloaking systems engaged. As they approached Earth, Carl couldn't help but marvel at the blue planet below, so full of life and potential. Now, it was up to them to ensure that potential wasn't snuffed out by fear and hatred. They landed on the roof of Blackwell Industries' towering headquarters, the cloaking technology allowing them to bypass the building's formidable external defenses. Inside, they encountered a labyrinth of security measures, retinal scanners, motion sensors, and armed guards patrolling every floor. "The Hazari excel at stealth," Xanth whispered, as they carefully made their way through the building. "But we've never faced human security systems like these before." Carl nodded, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "And I've never worked with alien tech this advanced. Guess we'll have to trust each other completely." Together, they navigated the treacherous path to Blackwell's office. Carl's combat training allowed him to predict and avoid guard patrols, while Xanth's superior agility and reflexes helped them bypass the most sensitive detection equipment. Finally, they reached Blackwell's private office on the top floor. As Carl worked to bypass the door's security, Xanth stood watch, her antennae twitching at every small sound. The office itself was a monument to opulence, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city below. But it was the hidden door behind Blackwell's desk that caught their attention. Carl triggered the mechanism, revealing a state-of-the-art command center. "Look at this," Xanth said, gesturing to a massive display showing a network of red dots spread across the globe and up to the space station. "These must be his sleeper agents. There are hundreds of them." Carl moved to access the computer systems, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar interface. "If we can just get into the main database, we can expose the entire network." Suddenly, a calm voice broke the silence. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that." They spun around to find Victor Blackwell himself standing in the doorway, a sleek, advanced weapon trained on them. His face was a mask of cold dedication, his eyes filled with a hatred that sent chills down Carl's spine. "You disappoint me, Carl," Blackwell said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I expected better from a decorated soldier. Instead, I find you conspiring with the enemy, betraying your own species." Carl stood his ground, positioning himself slightly in front of Xanth. "The only betrayal here is yours, Blackwell. You're willing to sacrifice countless lives, human and Hazari alike. For what? Fear? Greed?" Blackwell's eyes flashed with anger. For the future of humanity. Can't you see? These aliens will be the death of us all. They'll overwhelm us with their technology, their culture. In a few generations, there won't be anything human left. As Blackwell ranted, Carl noticed movement behind him. A group of Hazari soldiers materialized, led by a familiar face, Zorn. "You're wrong, Blackwell," Zorn said, his voice steady. "Our peoples have more to gain by working together than by fighting each other. I've seen it firsthand." Blackwell whirled around, his weapon now torn between multiple targets. In that moment of distraction, Carl lunged forward, attempting to disarm him. A fierce struggle ensued. Blackwell was stronger than he looked, fueled by desperation and years of pent-up hatred. His weapon discharged, the energy blast searing the air. "Carl!" Xanth cried out, leaping into action. She moved with incredible speed, pushing Carl aside just as another blast erupted from Blackwell's weapon. The energy bolt struck Xanth squarely in the chest, sending her crumpling to the ground. Carl's world seemed to slow down as he watched her fall, his heart pounding in his ears. With a roar of rage and anguish, Carl redoubled his efforts, finally wrenching the weapon from Blackwell's grasp. Zorn and his soldiers moved in, quickly subduing the struggling human. As Blackwell was restrained, Carl rushed to Xanth's side, cradling her in his arms. Her violet eyes flickered open, meeting his gaze with unwavering love and drive. Did we stop him?" she asked, her voice weak but steady. Carl nodded, tears stinging his eyes. "We did, thanks to you. Just hold on, Xanth, we'll get you help." As medical teams were called in and Blackwell was led away, Carl turned his attention to the command center's systems. With Zorn's help, they managed to access the main database, revealing the full extent of Blackwell's network and broadcasting his confession to both Earth and the Hazari fleet. The revelation sent shockwaves through both societies. On the space station, General Steele and Thax's task force sprang into action, using the new information to quickly neutralize the sleeper agents before they could carry out their destructive plans. As the immediate crisis passed, Carl stayed by Xanth's side, watching anxiously as both human and Hazari medical experts worked to stabilize her condition. The perilous events of the day had brought their two species closer together than ever before, united in a common cause. With Blackwell's plot exposed and the immediate threat neutralized, the peace talks took on a new urgency. As delegates from both species worked tirelessly to finalize the details of their alliance, Carl found himself looking to the future with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. He gazed out at the city skyline, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. The world had changed irrevocably in the span of a few short hours. As he turned back to Xanth's bedside, taking her hand in his, Carl knew that their journey, and the journey of their two peoples, was just getting started.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.